All right, so we have representatives this morning from the Cayman Islands. Let me get the correct name. Hold on one second now. We want to get it right. It is the Cayman Islands Pension Administrators Association, CIPAA. Do you pronounce it SIPA? SIPA? All right. We have coming up Chairman Mr. Randall Fisher. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Yes, welcome, welcome. And we also have Miss Alice Ramos, a representative from Saxon, and she is the deputy chair? What's your title? Yes.
Yep.
All right. So thank you so much, Alice. So let me tell you guys a little bit about Alice, because some of you might remember Alice. She's been on the program before we were on the morning show here in Bobo. We had an evening program twice a week. That's how the Cold Hard Truth started out. And during COVID, we were doing these programs. And of course, one of the things that the previous government did was allow people to access their pension funds for the purposes of kind of, riding out the COVID wave. We were in the early days, didn't really know what was going on and, how things were going to pan out. And so some people found themselves being unemployed in a bit of a tenuous financial situation. And so it was kind of confusing. Like people like, okay, when does it go into effect? What is it that we do? And so we had Alice on. Some of you might remember we had Alice on at that time to come and discuss, the pension withdrawals. And I can tell you, Alice, to this day, that remains one of my favorite shows. So many people tuned in. Like it was at that time a record for the evening show. The number of people, I think at one point it went like over 1,200 people or something ridiculous, who actually tuned in to hear Alice explain it. She did a phenomenal job breaking it down, explaining what the I think regulations or whatever were saying in terms of how you were going to access your pension. And I must say, of all of the pension companies, the one that got the most positive feedback in terms of, they were organized, they had an online portal, they were processing, their requests quickly, the whole 9 yards, was Saxon. And that's, I think, thanks in large part to Alice and her team over there, and just what an amazing job that they did. Like they quickly got things up and running. So kudos to you, Alice. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having us.
So you're here again to talk about even more pension changes that are happening. I feel like, and I don't know if you guys can really speak to this, that pension is still a little bit in flux in this country. Like it's relatively new. I remember when I returned to Cayman and when pensions were implemented. And I think that honestly, there's a whole lot of education that has to happen around pensions. People have this concept that pensions is like a savings account, right? I hear people all the time, well, it's my money and I should be able to access it. I should be able to use it. What's the purpose of a pension?
Right. Randy, I'll take this one. Pensions is to basically replace your salary at retirement. So, for your working careers, you're earning a salary, and then eventually, hopefully, you want to stop working at some point, whether that be 50, 60, 65. So it's intended to provide a salary at retirement.
And so the concept of always wanting to dip into your pension along the way is probably not a good idea.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously, the younger you are and you start saving, the less money you have to start saving. As you near retirement, you have to start saving more. And, obviously, as you're nearing retirement, you have larger bills, you have a mortgage, you have kids going off to college. So it's, harder for you to save more as you enter, age 50, 60. We actually do a presentation, which kind of gives you like a graph, an idea of, let's say someone who's 25, they probably only need to start saving about maybe between $200 and $300, maybe with an average return of 6% monthly, versus someone who's, maybe age 45, and then they have to start saving about, 4,000 if they want to hit a certain goal at retirement. So, it just paints a good picture. Like the younger you are, the less you have to start putting away, and you don't really have to worry about what's going to happen in the next 10 years when I'm about to retire.
Right. Yes. And not only is it a bad idea to keep dipping into your pension and trying to treat it as a savings account.
Yeah.
I think it's also a bad idea to look at the short-term numbers. So people are like, oh, in the last 6 months, I've lost $4,000, or last year I lost, again, because of what a pension is supposed to be.
Hmm.
It is meant to be there for 30, 40, whatever number of years. And the evidence and the research shows that pensions long term, not in
Hmm.
the short term, not in 4 or 5 years where things are fluctuating, the economy is doing all sorts of craziness, but long term, you're going to gain on your pensions. Can you explain the sort of concept of how pensions work at the end of the life cycle of your pension money?
Hmm. Brad, did you want to take that one?
No, I'll let you take that.
Well, I mean, the important thing, right, is you're putting money into the plan. The funds are invested, so you have, compounding interest that's happening every single month. So if you're withdrawing those funds, you're losing out on those
Mhm,
investments. So you want to ensure that you are putting money in, and you're looking at returns over a longer period. This is not, some type of investment that you're going to withdraw in the next 3 months. It's not some you're not putting down, or you're not going to use the funds in the next year. It's something that you're going to access when you're around, you know, age 65. So
mhm,
you're looking at having your returns over 40 or 50 years. So sometimes it might be scary when you look at a, specific period, especially if the markets are down, how
mhm,
it's affecting your pensions. But the most important thing is to look at your fund since inception, how the fund has done overall. Also look at historical figures. So how has the fund done over, the last 10 years? How has it done since inception? And those are the important things to review versus, a specific
Mhm.
period in time. Let's
mhm,
say, for instance, last year. Last year wasn't really a good comparison to use in terms of returns. Anywhere in the world, anyone who was retiring in 2022, they were advised basically not to. If you don't need to access those funds, don't, maybe push back retirement for another year or two for when the market does, come back.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And of course, it's probably difficult if someone is at retirement age and they're thinking, okay, the second I retire, I want to start accessing my pension fund. It might be difficult to tell them if you don't
Mhm.
have to do that to just hold off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely depends on the person, and it's, obviously it's their choice. They need to review their financial circumstances. Can they afford not to access their pensions? Can they defer that payment, for another 6 months or for another year?
Mhm,
So again, it just boils down to the individual, but, most financial advisors would have recommended, especially last year, to hold off if they could have.
mhm. Yes. Mr. Randall, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say when you indicated the short-term performance, that's what's been out there in the public domain,
Mm,
the last week. And
mhm,
really, like Alice has indicated, you need to look long term. But just to do some examples based on the information that was provided by the MP for Bodden Town West, if you looked at 2021, the performance of the funds that he compared to, the 2060 fund had a 20.38% return. The 2050 fund had an 18.93% return.
mhm,
Those far exceed inflation in
mm.
in 2021. But like Alice said, you definitely pensions, you have to look at the longer term.
Yes. And there is a little bit of, I think politics at play here. And I
Mhm.
know you guys may not want to necessarily speak to this, but again, when you have someone who is utilizing, for example, numbers from just a very, very narrow and specific period, and they don't take the time to then explain to people that this is not the entire life cycle of your pension plan, and you need to think longer term, and you need to, understand the very concept of how pensions are meant to work. And also, that to be quite frank and fair, a pension is not meant to be your only source of income at
Right.
retirement. It's
Hmm.
one stream, and you need to look at multiple things, like what's your overall, financial plan for you to be able to retire. No one is having these conversations
Yeah.
with the public. It's not in the politicians' interest to say those things to them because it's not politically expedient, right? It's politically expedient to say, oh, I'm going to change the law again to allow you to keep dipping into your pension. And then in 20 years, when those big withdrawals that you've made means that you're not going to have much in there,
Mhm.
don't come to me because I'm probably not even going to be in politics at the time, and I'll be getting my guaranteed government pension. Like there's just some real conversations here that I think as a community, we need to be having. And I think the general public needs to be better educated on this particular topic. And they need to understand that just because a politician says something, number one, doesn't make it true. Number two, doesn't make it completely true. So it might be partially true for a very specific period of time, but you've got to look and put everything in proper context. And I understand because I've used my pension fund to access a home ownership, and so I understand the benefits of that. I think it was Elio Solomon who first
Mhm.
put that to the government under the UDP administration, and it was widely accepted. It's helped a lot of people get into their homes, but I also understand that even with that being the case, and you get into home ownership, some people still manage to mess that up and they still manage to end up losing that very house. So now you've lost out your pension money and you've lost your house because you haven't been able to maintain it in the long term. And then what? What's
Yeah.
your position going to be at retirement? So let's talk about what the position was before, and then we'll talk about what these most recent changes are in terms of accessing your pension for the purposes of mortgage. So this is one of the ways in which you can access your pension funds before retirement. And just a reminder to our callers, of course, you can call into the program. 936-2626 is a telephone number. If you have a comment or question from our guests, we'll be joined by representatives this morning from the Cayman Islands Pension Association. We've got Miss Alice Ramos, who is at Saxon, and we have the chairman of that association, Mr. Randall Fisher, who's also here in the studio as well. And Mr. Randall, why don't you tell us a little bit, I kind of skipped over this, but Mr. Randall, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in the world of pensions, finance, and so on?
Yeah, finance-wise would be managing director of a Class B bank and trust company.
Mm-hmm.
On pensions, I did a stint of about 8 months with the Department of Labor and Pensions
Mm-hmm.
prior to joining one of the local pension plans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And then Alice, of course, Alice, tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been employed with Saxon, who offers client services to two plans currently in the Cayman Islands, so the Chamber Pension Plan as well as the Silver Thatch Pension Plan. I am the Chief Operating Officer, and I've been there for quite some time.
Yeah. All right. So Johan says, great job, Alice at Ramos, super professional and great practical advice. Vanessa's here. RD, we're going to come to your comment here in a second, as well as Lady Gangster. So there's certain exceptions. I mean, generally speaking, your pension is not meant for you to be withdrawing it to kind of live your life. But there are certain exceptions that are actually in the pensions law. So let's talk about what those are. The one that's of most interest to people is that you can actually access your pension funds for the purposes of making a contribution towards your mortgage down payment. Tell us a little bit about what the law says specifically.
So we'll just talk about what is currently in law at the moment. So the law allows for Caymanians, and I want to stress that section of the law is only available to Caymanians and status holders, in which they can use part of their pensions towards either a deposit to purchase a house. So this must be a residential home, including an apartment, or they can use it to purchase land, or they can use it to pay off their mortgage if it's less than $35,000. Obviously, if you have more than one person in your household and they are on the mortgage as well, you can have two parties who can withdraw from their pension. So let's say, for instance, someone wants to pay off their mortgage. It's currently 65,000, and both of those parties are Caymanians. They can use both of them could access their pensions to pay off their mortgage, but it has to be in full. Okay. Regarding the deposits, you could
And
use
let's pause there for a second, because
Mhm.
that's a really, really good point. So let me understand what you're saying. If the mortgage is, say, $100,000, right?
Mhm.
And I only have 35,000 available And can I take out everything, or is there a percentage of what I can take out?
Yeah, you can take out everything.
Okay.
We are mandated to pay the payment within a certain time, but
Mhm.
we could process the entire balance if that's what you have remaining.
Okay. So if I only have between, say, my husband and I, $70,000, but the mortgage is $100,000, I can't withdraw it because it's not going to pay off the full mortgage, or can I withdraw it and find 30 grand or whatever
Yeah, if
from
you
someone
have
else?
if you have 30 grand available somewhere else in your savings,
Mhm.
you could pay that down on your mortgage and then withdraw the balance to pay off the mortgage.
I gotcha. Very good. All right. And then if you do take that option up and you utilize that option, what are the stipulations about what you can do with the property?
Yeah, so you have to repay an additional 1% on your salary monthly, up to a period of either 10 years or retirement, or until you've paid off the funds, whichever comes first.
Mhm.
There's usually some confusion around this because most people think that, let's say, for instance, the 10 years comes first. That just means
Mhm.
that you just have to stop paying. It doesn't mean that, the lien will be removed. So if you decide to sell that property, let's say after 15 years, you're no longer paying down on the amount that you withdrew, you
Mhm.
are still mandated to prepay whatever you withdrew from the plan. So the amount that you repay will also depend on the value of your home. So it could either be that you withdrew 35,000, but let's say your home
Mhm.
is currently worth 500,000. So
Mhm.
10% of that is 50,000. So you're either repaying what you withdrew or 10% of the market value, whichever is greater. So being that the market value in
Mhm.
this example was 50,000, you're going to have to repay 50,000. Okay, so it's just something for people to be
Mm.
very mindful of. Most people, kind of ignore that last
Yeah.
document that they sign when they're collecting their check. It's advising the member
Uh-huh.
that, hey, you need to repay 1%, or essentially you need to repay this back into your pensions, especially if you are planning to sell the house in this market, because you might end up paying back more than you withdrew.
All right. So let's just pause a second because I want this to sink in. So this just isn't money that you're able to just grab from your pensions and take it as a free loan. You're
No.
actually having to pay it back. And in some instances, you are paying back more than
Mhm.
you took out.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So, I mean, audience, did y'all just hear that? And more importantly, did you understand that? Because I do believe, as Alice said, 99.999% of people do not appreciate that it's not free money. You are paying it back, and you may be paying back more than you actually took out of your pension. And there's also other caveats. So you can't sell the house. Oh, we do have a caller
Mhm.
on the line. Uh-oh. Did they decide to call in? Let's see here. Uh okay. Maybe they didn't decide to call in, but 936-2626. I just want to make sure that everybody understands this point, because again, I think it's something that has just gone over people's heads. They've been happy to ignore it. So who ensures that the person pays it back? So how does that part of it work?
Right. I mean, it is up to the member to ensure that they are, following the law. So, the section of the law basically dictates that they are required to repay 1%.
Mhm.
So, when they're completing a form, they have their employer also sign an employment agreement where the employer agrees to withdraw 1%, and the employee is also agreeing to that. So, it's up to the member to inform their employer that they have made this withdrawal, it was successful, and to ensure that their employer is deducting from their salary. Sometimes they will change jobs. So again, it's on the member to inform their employer if they need to make an additional 1% to the pension plan.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. The other aspect is the Department of Labor and Pensions will register a restriction against the property. So
Mhm.
if and when a person was try to sell their property, that restriction is going to be there. So that needs to be cleared before anybody would get clear title.
Mhm. And how long is the restriction in place for?
Until the funds are repaid.
Yep.
Until the funds are repaid. All right. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Sunday morning,
Good
morning to you and your
morning.
guests as well.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to really ask a question because I did understand the fact and how the government has it that you can only
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about paying off the mortgage, like you were just saying,
Mm-hmm.
30,000, you got to come up with the rest yourself. But what
Right.
about those dormant pensions? So, for example, I have say 3, 4 different pensions I have with different ones, right?
Uh-huh.
Two or three of mine are dormant, have been sitting there, and they're not really being depleted bad by all these administrative fees. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't consolidated them over to the active one, where
Mm-hmm.
I contribute to. So those dormant ones aren't we allowed just to suck those out completely dry if we want? Since I have more than one pension, I know I can consolidate them, as I said. I know that I can move them, right? But why in this case then? If it's and that's just a question, really. Those dormant ones, can we just pull the whole thing out to put towards the mortgage rather than the active one where you can only take up, if your mortgage is only 30,000, then that's, it has to be that amount, or you got to come up with the rest yourself. So I don't know if I'm too clear with the question, but
Yeah, yeah,
dormant pensions,
Yes. All
because
right.
right?
Thank you.
yeah.
So
I
Let's see what
understand the
Becky would
question.
have to say. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
right.
Yeah. So, although he's not contributing to the other plans, it's not technically dormant because the funds continue to be invested.
Mm.
So it's just another, key point for members of the audience to understand. Even though you're not contributing, to the plan, those funds will remain to be invested until you access those funds at retirement. Um, and then the other question that he had in regards to making a partial payment to his mortgage is just not allowable at the moment. So, under this current law, regardless if
Mm.
the motion was passed, the current law does not allow you to make a partial payment on your mortgage. So, it has to
Mm-hmm.
be in full. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Okay, so really, really good point, and I'm glad that you clarified that as well in terms of because I think the problem is, and I'm guilty of this as well. We're all thinking of pensions as almost like a savings account.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
say terms like a dormant account,
Yeah.
that's another indicator that we're thinking about it in a completely wrong context, right?
Yeah.
So in the U.S., when people have pensions and 401k, you don't hear them talking about it in terms of like a dormant account or whatever because they've had them in place for so much longer.
Yeah.
I think they have a little bit of a better understanding of how pensions and stuff like that work. In the
Hmm.
world of pensions, the Cayman scheme is extremely young.
Hmm.
So, an entire multiple generations of people are trying to get educated and learn a bit more about it. So thank you for the question, young man. It was a good question. So Lavana says that basically it's like a within pensions loan, basically.
Essentially, right. Yeah, but you're not
Mhm.
paying interest on the amount that you withdrew. And the guidelines right now on the amount that you have to repay, doesn't fall in line with the typical loan. But
Mhm.
essentially, at the end of the day, yes, you're borrowing against your pensions because it has to be repaid.
Mhm.
Just going back to something that you said earlier, Sandra, and just in terms of education, like it's so key to understand, pensions because it does apply to everyone working in the Cayman Islands.
Mhm.
And I highly recommend that, members reach out to their employers to, request a presentation from their current
Mhm.
pension provider. It's something that we offer for free, all of the plans in the
Mhm.
islands. So it's just good to, get a refresher. Again, pensions is not an attractive topic. It's not something that we think about daily, again, because most of us are far away from pensionable age, but it is just something to think about, especially the more younger people that have time to actually save towards a healthy retirement fund.
Mhm.
Mm.
Very good. All right. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program. Question or comment?
Good morning, Sandra. Question.
Morning.
My question is around repayment.
Mhm.
What is the term? Is there a fixed term once you for the maximum 35 deposit?
Right. So I did mention this a bit earlier, but it is a bit confusing because what's currently in the law is just the repayment terms, right?
Mhm.
So there are three options, and it's whichever one you hit first. But just something to add, you have to repay it in full if you want the lien removed. So
Mhm.
in terms of repaying the funds, you have an option to either repay it within 10 years, repay it at until retirement age, or whichever one comes first, or until you've no longer own the property. So it, if you hit 10 years before retirement. So let's say you withdrew those funds at age 30. You're not going to retire at 4. You're not eligible to retire at 40. So you can stop paying at age 40. However, you will need to repay the funds if you sell the property. Okay. So it's just a weird wording in the current law.
Caller, did that help?
Sort of. So essentially, it should be repaid in full based on this 1% within 10 years. That will cover it after 10 years.
Unfortunately, the 1% does not calculate to the amount. It's not related to the amount that you've withdrawn.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's also causes confusion. So if you do have a goal to, let's say, repay the funds within 10 to 15 years, I would recommend that you do a calculation and evenly distribute that over the period that you would like to repay the funds.
Okay, so at any point we can check with pension provider to see what's the balance outstanding on the loan amount.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
I would say, if you are contacting them, in the near future, just be patient with them. We have been receiving a lot of questions since last Friday. So, they might not be able to get to you right away, but, I would assume within a few days that they can get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for that question. So whatever question you have, folks, now regarding pensions, this is a perfect opportunity to ask experts. Don't speculate, and speculation leads to you getting it wrong. So it seems like Lady Gangster is a little bit confused. She says, what nonsense? If you draw your own pension, it becomes a loan to be paid back. You have to repay your own money. Now, Lady Gangster, I'm surprised you seem surprised by that because you just said a minute ago, this is a great idea to use it for your mortgage, to take it out. So this is why, we have this organization and members of the Pension Association on the show, because you're sitting down thinking this is free money. This is great. This is how it's going to work, because the legislators have been pushing it, saying, go grab, do a bag grab, do a money grab, but nobody is talking to you about the details. And as they always say, my dear friend, the devil is in the details. You have to understand what it is that you're actually getting into. And I know the excitement when you're getting that mortgage, honey child, you don't care where the money's coming from. That's the same reason when you run to the bank, you're not looking at the interest rates. You're not looking at the fine print. I had someone say to me a couple of days ago, but Sandy, how can you sign a contract and the banks keep increasing the interest rates? That wasn't in your contract. I said, really? Did you read your contract? Because surely you must know that it's in the contract and the banks have a right to increase your interest rates over the term of the mortgage. How can you say such a foolish thing that, they're in breach of contract? No, they're not. But there's so much excitement over something as positive as home ownership. You fall into these pitfalls of not being realistic about what's actually going on. So this program is called The Cold Hard Truth, and we're just giving it to you. 936-2626 is the telephone number. Do call in with your questions. Let me just see here now. So we do have, and I know this has been answered, but just to clarify it, because this person says, I'm not clear on the answer on this. Let's say I have $50,000, but I owe $100,000 on my mortgage, on my loan. And does it apply to land loans as well?
No. Right now, you can only pay off a mortgage. So, a mortgage would be on a dwelling unit. So a land loan is quite different from a mortgage. So you can withdraw up to $35,000 to pay off a mortgage, not a land loan.
Okay. Yeah. So this person says, let's say that I have $50,000, but I owe $100,000 on my loan. Can I withdraw the $50,000 to cut the loan in half, therefore shortening the life of the loan?
Not at the moment. So the motion that was passed on Friday, that has not come into law yet. I believe it will allow you to pay down on land loans as well as a mortgage, but that has not come into effect yet. So I just want to highlight, today we're talking about what is currently law, and then hopefully, we'll be invited again once we have an update on the motion. If it does come into law, then we'll, provide a breakdown at that time.
Yeah, and that motion would allow $50,000 to be withdrawn. So in his example.
Right. Okay. All right. And then, so say you pay off the mortgage, the lien is on there until you repay that amount.
Correct.
You're able to sell the house or do whatever with it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, people are still allowed to sell the home, even if there's, the lien there. Obviously, each institution needs to be, their outstanding contribution or amounts need to be satisfied. However, the bank will take their funds, the pension plans will take their funds, and just, something to the public, if the property is worth more today, which more than likely it will be, you may
Mm,
potentially be paying back more than you withdrew. So you have some people who probably don't have $35,000 available. Maybe they only had $10,000 available. So in some
mm,
cases, they withdrew $10,000 from their pension plan, but their home is selling at a greater value. So 10% of that market value might be, I don't know, maybe 60,000. So you're paying back 60,000 versus 10,000.
mhm,
So just again, something to be mindful.
mhm. Hmm. Wow. That's an eye opener, actually.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but by buying the property, you made a huge profit. So
Yeah.
Yes. Because I was thinking about it, but now that I'm so glad you guys are here because it's even sinking in for me as we're having this conversation. Because I was thinking that one of the pitfalls of this is that someone could then turn around and sell their house and still or lose it to foreclosure or still find themselves not having really benefited. So what happens in the event that somebody's house? So say I take out money to acquire the property initially and then my home goes into foreclosure and I end up losing it. I still am on the hook for paying that pension amount back.
I mean, to be quite honest, I've never
yeah.
experienced that type of scenario, so
Yeah,
I can't answer that today, but I'll definitely look into that. It is a good question, though.
yeah,
Yeah,
because this is some rather serious implications of you better think long and hard
yeah,
about whether or not this is really going to benefit you. So please let us know the answer to that because I can definitely see that happening. Murphy's law, if it can happen, it's going to happen to at least that one or two people,
yeah. I mean, the
right?
good thing
So
is that we haven't experienced it yet, so
yeah, knock
good thing so far.
on wood. Okay. Alejandro says, so true. One thing that I've learned is a lot of people comply without questions. And this is a very dangerous thing, Alejandro, when you sign documents and you don't ask questions, you don't seek to really educate yourself and understand what it is that you're getting into. And then when you're in a situation, and the real brunt of what's happening comes to bear on you, that's when you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that, or I didn't understand that. Knowledge is power. That's why they say, folks, knowledge is power. So Joanna, good morning. She says she's talking about public pensions versus private pensions, the PSPB, Public Service Pension Board. Now, I had invited them onto the program. So let me just say this. They thought they had found someone to come on today. Unfortunately, after 9 o'clock last night, we got a message that they will not have anyone from the DLP able to come on. However, I have gotten assurances from Mr. Frans Manderson, the deputy governor, that he will arrange to have someone come on at a later date. He's out of office this week, but next week he's back in office and he's going to work diligently and having someone come on who can explain the difference between the private pension, public pension, which is a public service pensions board. In other words, that's for civil servants. Civil servant pension is mandated and operated under completely different law. And the short answer for those of you who are listening who are civil servants is you cannot access your pension funds in the same way that private sector pension funds can be accessed. And there's actually a very logical and good reason for that. The bottom line is the pension couldn't afford to have a run. Keep in mind that government is the largest employer on the island, and they couldn't afford to have a run of all you people going and grabbing money out of the public service pension fund. It wouldn't perform the way that it should to help those people who are actually getting a pension. But we're going to have them come on and break it down in terms of how the public service pension fund works and what the law says and why they don't allow you to dip into that at all. And they seem to make zero exceptions because, as you'll remember, even during COVID, there was no dipping into the public one. So I also want to, from just a community perspective, I also want you to keep that in mind. So although the politicians are saying to you, you have private sector public pension available, oh, you go use it. They themselves, who they might have private pensions, I don't know, but they definitely are getting one now public once they're an elected MP, right? They get a pension. They themselves are not able to dip into it for very, very good reason. And so they're encouraging you to do something that they probably themselves will not and could not even do. So be, again, very, very cautious that you understand all of the elements of if you make this decision, what are the implications? So Lavana says, I'm so happy that they came on today. This is very educational and is answering a lot of questions I had too. Thank you. Knowing is key, and it absolutely is. And I must say, Alice, you and I were on the same wavelength in terms of this because
Yeah.
I was actually on Monday heading back to the airport. I was in Miami for the weekend, and I was already kind of working out my agenda for this week's topics, right? And so I messaged Alice and I said, "Hey, Alice, I really need you guys to come on to talk about this whole pension thing." And she said, "I was just about to message you about the exact same thing."
Yeah.
We were definitely thinking along the same line.
Mhm.
So Lady Gangster, just not in acceptance. She claims that this is scamming to borrow your own savings and you have to pay it back. So let's correct that statement. It is not a savings. So the fact that people cannot fundamentally understand what a pension is, how can we change that? I mean, what do we do to educate people?
Again, yeah, just Sandra, just going back to education is
Yep.
just so it's key. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I think it starts with when they, start their employment.
Mm,
Whether it's the employer hold like a monthly orientation day, maybe an annual refresher. The association has discussed having seminars. Every year the pension plans
mhm,
also host AGMs. We invite all of the members. So it really is for the members to take advantage of those opportunities to go and speak
mhm,
to their pension providers to understand, how the pension plan is performing, how pensions works in the Cayman Islands. You mentioned a
mhm.
401k earlier, which is ran completely different. In
Yes.
the US, people have tax, benefits for contributing to a 401k. So they're educated from an early age, why it's important to contribute to a pension plan. That's
Mhm,
tax free going in. So, it's just about education.
mhm,
And if
Mhm.
the listening person that made those comments, I would definitely encourage her to reach out to her pension plan to understand how, it operates. And, maybe this is a great opportunity to talk about the private plans. So,
mhm,
the National Pensions Law Act, I should say, and regulations only apply to private pension plans. It does not apply to the Public Service Pension Board. And in addition, those laws and regulations are created by the Cayman Islands government. So it's not created by the private plans. The private plans are only following the regulations that are set out and ensuring that the plans are run in compliance.
All right, we have a caller with a lot of background noise. Caller, good morning.
Morning. Um, Sorry about that. But
Yes.
the I think the education on financial literacy should start in the high school
Oh,
systems
Correct.
definitely
Mhm,
agree.
really
Yep.
intensively.
Yep.
mhm,
A couple of years ago, I asked Paul Biles that question on the
mhm,
radio, and he agreed.
mhm,
Um, but we actually need to make some progress because people who believe that the pension is just something you can just take out and
mhm,
are going to find out that they're going to retire and be in a real serious bind.
mhm,
Yep.
I can
Yep.
understand that the situation when you had the serious lockdown.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with the lockdown. Like that's a different story, however. But it did happen, and it
mhm,
put a good number of people in a difficult situation. And for something that um, as unpredictable as that would have been for the general public to see coming,
mhm.
I could understand a limited withdrawal to tide people over. But what we really need is um, a program where people to understand the process of understanding why it's important to have a savings account, and
that actually has money in it.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Because
and
you can have a savings account, they can have $5. It's still not going to do you much good.
yeah, I agree. But what I'm saying is that a pension isn't really a savings in the sense that
Yes,
people
that's
are
right.
thinking about it for
Yeah.
these short-term situations. And so and my comments are not limited to just pensions, but to be functionally literate in society when it comes to finances is something that we desperately need, because we'll be talking about this in 20 and 40 years from now if we don't put a program in place, because this is just basic understanding about finance.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Couldn't
caller.
agree more. Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah. And I mean, that was the whole idea, in terms of putting a pension in place, is because the government recognizes that, people are living longer, and they're not going to be in a position. I love this comment here by Scott. Scott says that you have to pay it back so that NAU doesn't have to finance your retirement years. Pensions ravaged by COVID withdrawals already need to pay it back. Similar pension and retired accounts withdrawals exist in other countries, and they all have to be paid back over time. So that's the whole idea, folks, is the government is not going to be able to help you in your senior years. That should not even be a thought in your head that that's going to be your bailout, because it's not going to be. We do have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Sandra, and to your guests there.
Morning.
I just got two quick questions, and then I'll hang up. Is the government pension, I mean, in the public sector now for the government, are they pensions guaranteed not to lose? Like, if you put something into it, they don't lose it, like in the private. Private sector.
Let me answer that for you. Let me answer that for you, because I think it's important to recognize something as it relates to government pensions. First of all, the government pension is non-contributory, so you're never losing because you don't put anything in. Think of it that way. You don't contribute to your government pension at all. Government puts in the full, I don't know what the percentage is now, but if it's 10%, it's 5. They put the full 10% in.
Yeah, but I mean, you volunteer. If you want to put in, you could put in too, right?
I mean, you can, but tell me how many civil servants you think are doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, and there's no guarantees when it comes to investments, but yeah.
Yeah, and the next question I have now is for the private pension. Can something be done to guarantee the people that they're not going to lose any money once they put into this pension scheme? That is the thing, because I personally lost about $8,000 on my pension back in like the 2001 round that way.
Yeah, but overall, how long have you had pension for? Let me ask you a question.
Overall, I had the pension at the time since it had started. When did it originally start? 96 or something?
Back in 97. Right. So overall, have you lost over that period of whatever number of years that is? What has been your gain since 1997? Gains or losses?
No, well, since I lost in 2002, I don't contribute to a pension. I'm afraid to tell nobody that. The government know that too, but for the same reason, if they was to bring the pension here in Cayman and invest the money here in Cayman, and it's like I'm saying that it isn't a savings account, but if it works more like a savings account, me personally talking to myself, I would contribute to it 100%, but I don't contribute to a pension. But for the same reason, I don't think it's fair. And I mean, that's my moral towards it. I don't think it's fair that you working so hard to contribute to something. What we need here is something like a 401k. That's what we need. When we put in money, regardless if the public or private sector, that we put in money, that it doesn't lose. We don't lose any. I mean,
all right, let's ask experts about that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. So first of all, 401, is that a truthful statement? The 401 pension don't lose?
No,
that can't be.
They're all invested
money.
Yeah.
What's the difference between what we have versus a 401 pension?
Tax deduction when you put the money in.
And so they're being invested the same way. So if the market
majority of them are voluntary. So it depends like on the benefits that they have with their employer. Some employers might be paying 100% of it, or do like a matching scheme. But like Randy said, it's just majority of it's tax benefits.
So they're still gaining and losing on 401s, just like
I mean,
still investing. And
I don't know of any kind of investments that will guarantee you a certain percentage. But if you do come across those, let me know.
I know I want to sign up too. I mean, there's no guarantees in life. Like I think it is again very dangerous when people, and this, it's just fundamentally, I guess maybe, or lack of understanding. But when we're looking for guarantees, there's no guarantee that you're going to wake up in the morning, much less. I mean, come on, folks. I mean, you've got to just be realistic. But again, the reason why I was asking him about the duration of his, like from 1997 until now, what have been the losses or gains? Right. So if someone has been contributing to a pension plan since 1997, I believe that's when they first started. Can you tell us overall what have been the losses and gains in the market? I mean, I know it might vary.
It will vary for each plan. And what I would say is to reach out to your pension plans because majority of them will have that information. I know, for the Silver Thatch pension plan, we actually just posted something on our social media, just giving you an idea of returns versus inflation. Definitely if they want to know how much they've earned since 1998, the last 10 years, the last 5 years, that's available. And the same on the chamber plan. I'm pretty sure all of the plans have that available. So again, educate yourselves. Don't take certain things at face value. Look at your statements, those things that you receive in the mail and you probably just chuck in the garbage. Open them up. Majority of them will have a summary since you've joined the plan. So it's really important to look at the dollar figure that you've placed into the plan and your returns. Now, granted, if you've joined the plan in the last 2 years, it might vary. But if you've been with the plan since 1998, you should see those returns on those statements.
And the bottom line is those will show you gains and not losses since 1998.
Yes.
Just to answer the caller's question, the investment regulations is key. Those regulations came out in 1998, have not been changed for 24 years. And in those investment regulations, they limit what private pension plans can do with the funds. For example, we must maintain 40 to 70% of the portfolio in equities, stock market. Even if we had a crystal ball, you look at 2008, 35% loss in the market with the financial crisis. You look at last year, 2022, probably a loss of about 17%. Even if we had a crystal ball, we would not be able to liquidate the portfolio and sit in a cash position because those investment regulations stipulate, the restrictions on the private pension plans.
Just to add to that, Sandy, just remember the National Pensions Act and the National Pensions Regulations was created by the Cayman Islands government. Okay. And then also just, to do some comparisons, the Public Service Pension Board does not fall under the same regulations as the private pension plans.
Correct.
They have two different regulations. So just a food for thought.
Well, we've got 3 callers on the line, so let's go ahead and take them in order. I think number ending in 5369 was first. Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning,
Sandra. Good
morning.
I had 2 quick questions. I was hoping, I'm just now tuning into the show, but 2 things. Number 1, could someone explain to me what would be stopping civil servants from going into the private sector to pull from their pension? I mean, is it that the public pension would transfer over to a private pension that they can pull out the money to, pay for their mortgage, pay for the land? That's question number 1. And question number 2, could any of the experts explain I know in countries like Singapore, they have something where it's a mandatory savings account. It's not really a pension. It's a mandatory savings account where you can contribute, you can borrow against it, but you cannot touch that money before retirement age. Why don't we have something like that here? What are the pros and cons of that? And yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I think we had
the first question, I think, is whether or not you can take money from public, and some people during COVID were trying to do this. You can take money from the PSPB, the Public Service Pension Fund, transfer it into private fund, and then at some point withdraw it.
Yeah. So someone did ask that question earlier. So, just answering two parts. So, transfers from the Public Service Pension Board to any private plan in the Cayman Islands is allowable. So it's just for that person to make an application once they're not employed with government anymore. So if they're no longer a civil servant, they're no longer contributing to the Public Service Pension Board, they can make an application to transfer from public service to a private plan. So it's just a matter of making an application. Regarding current civil servants as well, if they do have a private plan, they can withdraw the funds from the private plan to use towards the deposit or paying off their mortgage. Okay, so that is allowable. So it's just, again, for people to understand what their options are.
Right. And if it's not, so if it's a situation where they're a civil servant, at some point they worked in private sector, so they have access to those funds, but they're no longer contributing to that because now they're civil servant, how do they pay that back?
Yeah, so they basically, they'll set up a standing order and they'll make the 1% deduction, contribution themselves. And then I also know of some departments, government departments now that are actually making the deduction and paying it directly to the plan. So that's happening. I'm not sure if it's only a handful, but we have seen payments come directly from those departments.
All right, let me just see who's next in queue on the lines. Thank you so much, caller, for that question. We've got 0984. You're up next. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Sandy. It's Johan Moxham. How's it going?
Good morning. Good. How are you?
I just want to say thank you to Ms. Alice and Mr. Randall for coming on and sharing their knowledge with us. It's really, really helpful. Alice, I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Trying to break things down. But I just wanted to, make a comment. When you consider the fact that pensions are mandatory in Cayman for all the reasons that we have heard this morning, but the fact that we have two different systems for a public pension and a private pension, and then when you consider the fact that for, I think Mr. Randall said, for the past 24 years, successive governments, successive MPs have failed to address what is a real concern, that the regulations and rules surrounding pensions probably needed to be updated and amended. The question listeners and voters need to ask is, what the hell have they been doing? How has this not been a priority?
But let me just say this, caller, just to pause you, but it's a priority to continue to allow people to dip into their pension funds without educating them about the pitfalls of doing so. So the same way that they have pushed to, we're going to give you more money. And I see them, on their social media, patting themselves on the back and, sending out all these WhatsApp messages. Look at all the great stuff that we've done to allow you to dip into your pension fund even more. They're not even taking the time to explain to you, by the way, you need to pay that back, right? You do know that. And you might end up paying back more than you took out. And by the way, the same energy that we put into allowing you to continue to pillage your pension fund, we've not bothered to update the substantive part of the legislation to really help you when it comes to like pension investments and so on. None of that is a priority. I mean,
that's a fair point, but I will say this. You can't expect a politician to be anything more than a politician, which is to spread a message, give hope, and be very short on the substance and the depth of the details, right? Because ultimately, the way that they spin the message, and it's not a politician today, it's politicians over the last 20, 30 years have been doing this. They are fueling the belief that it is your money and it's almost like a savings account, so therefore we're giving you access to that. What I think speaks volumes, though, is the fact that, let's say you never touch your pension fund, you never touch your pension monies. The fact that you'll get a maximum of about $1,000 or $1,500 a month from your monies that you've committed to that pension plan, again, what the hell have they been doing? Because who in the Cayman Islands can survive off of $1,000 or $1,500 a month? That's just impractical given the way Cayman is, the cost of living, inflation, so on and so forth. So I think people need to start paying attention and asking questions of the same politicians of today and yesterday and decades ago, because you're now being sold something without being given all the full details. But more importantly, if I put, let's just use a figure. Let's say I have $200,000, just a figure in my savings account. We go through dips. I'm not savings account, sorry, pension plan. If we go through a dip where the market takes a hit, yes, we're taking significant losses because all the funds are commingled and other plans and so on and so forth. But I'm not saying that there's a guarantee that you're supposed to get it all back up. But if I can have access to my money now in order to pay for the house or whatever legitimate means that is required, then surely there is a moral and professional obligation by the pension provider to make me whole, because they invested on things that we aren't really sophisticated investors about to understand that resulted in loss. So you can't expect for the common person to feel comfortable that I've given you X amount of money. This was the balance in my pension plan, and now I'm below that because of the volatility of the market. In the same way that you can expect for me to make a payment if I withdraw money and repay or stock up that pension account, then the same expectation the customer should have of the pension provider, because every month, every year, it doesn't matter whether they're up or down, that pension provider collects its fees. So let's just be fair and balanced, that there is a moral, ethical, and professional obligation to ensure that everything is done to make the contributor to that pension plan whole, because it doesn't matter if it rains, snows, or hurricane, that pension provider is going to get their monies on a monthly, annual basis, whatever the payment plan is, and the consumer is then left in the hole. So I just wanted to bring some balance to it. I appreciate greatly the work that Miss Alice and everything that she shared with us. Same thing with Mr. Randall. But I think we need to bring balance to this and understand the rules have to change, but we have to hold the right people accountable, which is those same people that come and promise you and give you grocery cards and $200 every time there's an election. Know your worth, because you're getting screwed by those same people. They have money. They have a separate pension plan that looks out for them. Who's looking out for you? So choose wisely, but more importantly, let's change the rules so that in the same way a pension can say, well, Johan, you took X amount of money out, you need to top it back up. Well, you lost me X amount of money, so you need to make me whole. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right,
Those are really good comments. Yeah. Sandy, I'll just take that latter part, just talking, Johan, just talking about pension plans, collecting fees. That's obviously highlighted, whether the market is up or down. I just want to highlight that, I am a part of this plan. Randy is a part of, the chamber plan. So we have, we are invested in this plan. As an association, we have reached out to, the ministry multiple times to discuss when the investment regs will be adjusted. There were talks of it, I think it was like maybe, 2012, like, a couple of years ago, at least over 10 years ago, talking about changes to the investment regs. The same time when they brought out the bill in 2012, talking about changes to the National Pensions Act. And since then, nothing has been done. I mean, so it's not as if we're not trying. We want some flexibility when it comes to down markets. We want to, make good decisions for the members. It's not just a matter of collecting a paycheck at the end of the day, because we're also in this plan. Talking about government, I can't speak on their behalf in terms of, what they're doing, but I assume it must be a difficult position for them. As I opened the show saying, pensions is not an attractive topic. You're talking about making deductions from someone's salaries. Some people, who probably can't make, or pay for their basic needs. So it's really difficult when you talk about increasing contribution rates, but when we talk about, pensions, how can it improve? Other countries, like the US, they have Social Security. So you pay taxes to go towards a Social Security, and then you have additional benefits like a 401k, which is offered by the employer. You get tax breaks on it. So, there are other like safety nets in other countries versus in Cayman, we don't have a Social Security. I'm not advocating for one, but I'm just saying we don't have that. We only have that pension plan savings. So it again, just putting, maybe speaking to your representative, trying to understand, why are private plans held to a different standard? Why have the investment regs not been reviewed in the last 20 years?
It's a good question. 936-2626, folks. This is your opportunity. If you have a question or comment for the pension experts, don't let this opportunity pass you by. I was reaching out as you were speaking, Alice, to the deputy governor, because I saw that I think it was RD Limited that said that that's incorrect. My comment about non-contributory pension for public sector. He says the 6% portion that is contributed is part of the emolument package, so that it's calculated in the civil servant salary and taken right back out. And I can tell you that it doesn't impact the salary that you're making. So government pays full pension for civil servants. The money is shown in salary statements as an earning and also as a payment pension. So to think that what you're making is going to be impacted by the fact that it's not part of the negotiations for the salary. So I'm not really sure, RD, but this is why we need them to come on separately. And you can ask these questions and you can have them explain it, and it can be answered by the arm that actually is aware. So I'm sending them, as you're asking these questions, sending them these comments so that they can know what people are interested in hearing from them when they come on, hopefully next week. So Salvin has a question. He says, can you ask your guests what's the strategy of reinvesting pension funds? And is there a limit on what amount can be reinvested? So I think that's been partially answered. But if you can answer that directly.
Yeah. So I'm assuming he's talking about additional voluntary contributions. It is something that's encouraged. And depending on the plan that he's with, he might have an option to select his portfolio, but he would have to reach out directly to the plan to understand his options. But he can make additional voluntary contributions. So that's anything in addition to what you're required to pay by law. So whether that's a dollar amount or a percentage amount that he wants to do directly or he wants to do through HR, that is possible.
All right. Alberto says that the pension administrators adjust your investment scheme for clients almost at retirement. Also, is there a process to mitigate losses during crises, pandemics, natural disasters, etc.?
Yeah. Again, because we're, speaking on behalf of the association, it would really depend on the plan that you're with. Some plans have different portfolios. They follow a life cycle, while others might only have one fund. So it's just dependent on the plan that he's with.
Okay. And do you take anything into consideration for pandemics or anything like that?
Again, we're tied to the investment regulations, so that we're very limited in terms of what we can do.
Yep.
Interesting. All right. Some really good questions here today. Thank you so much, Alberto. Bink says, if you take your pension now, and God forbid you die before you repay the pension loan, what do you leave behind for loved ones? What was the point on this earth life wasted and family still left with nothing? Think about our children having to lay you to rest, plus pay your owed bills. That's how we keep generations broke. So what happens in the event of death before you repay that pension loan?
Yeah, we haven't dealt with that, but I assume that the lien will still remain on there until the funds are repaid. But I would have to confer with the Department of Labor and Pensions on that. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, hopefully you've bought a property that's making a substantial profit.
Yes, that's a good question, Binks. And again, something for people to really be mindful of themselves. Because I mean, you want to think about, what are you leaving for your kids? And are you potentially, instead of leaving them something of value, are you actually leaving them some potential debt? That one is making me pause, Binks. I got to tell you, because I hadn't thought of it ever. Josephine, she has a question. She says, Sandy, can you ask Alice if public servants can withdraw from silver thatch? So that means that they would have private money in silver thatch?
Yeah, so some of the what's it called, like the
Oh, the
regulatory
authorities.
bodies, yeah,
Statutory bodies.
they are with private plans. So yes, they can. It's not like COVID or the emergency withdrawal. So they are eligible now to withdraw under the current law. So there's no limitations with that. Will that change? I'm not sure, but right now, as it stands, yes, they can.
Okay. Lavana says, sorry to say, but nothing is 100% guaranteed. The only thing guaranteed is death. Just saying. I know, not even birth is guaranteed anymore. I mean, never has been, but good point there, Lavana. Once you're here. Selvin says, is that correct that one in the public sector does not have to contribute to their pension? Isn't pension package a part of their pay package? But you don't contribute to it. So you get a salary, whatever the salary is, and then they'll just give you 10% of whatever your salary is. I'm not really sure what the confusion is. It's considered a non-contributory pension plan. All right, Ms. Brenda says, allowing people to drain their pension now is setting them up as NAU dependents later on. Think of it like that. Pensions already being badly invested and consistently losing. Think about it. If you don't understand the consequences, ask someone to help you understand. So partially a correct statement, but in the long term, we've already established that pension plans are actually gaining and not losing. So, but yes, I mean, again, and also one of the key takeaways this morning, folks, is your pension contribution is not the only thing you should be thinking of for your retirement. Where else is money going to come from? Do you have rental income? Do you have, I don't know what else you can do, investing in other properties, other types of investments. You got to think beyond just pension. That's not going to be it.
Yeah.
I think we read that from RD already. Lady Gangster says, my BBC, lean on your property to use pension that is withdrawn from money that comes from your salary. These scammers have people money on the stock market getting lots of gains when the market high. I'm not sure I understand that. But gains would be good. So
Definitely.
Lady Gangster, I think you might need to don't take this as a dig, but based on some of the comments that you've made, sitting down with a financial advisor, taking a financial management course, taking a course in understanding pensions might not be a bad idea. Ralph, good morning, Rafi, says, can we withdraw all of our money from pension if we roll over and have no plans to come back? Now, we've seen the pitfalls of this because nobody ever has any plans to come back until the next work permit comes in. This was this closed? Because I think there was some attempts to close this, because people would always say this, Ralph, oh, I'm never going to come back again. Give me my money. And then they run back home to Jamaica, US, Canada, the Philippines, wherever. And in a couple of years, here they come again.
Yeah, that's the termination of residence is no longer an option for those who have more than 5,000 in their account. So the option would be to either access your funds at retirement age or try to transfer the funds to an international pension plan. So whichever country the person is moving to, they can make a request to transfer those funds after 2 years of terminating the residence in the Cayman Islands.
So yes, Rafi, that has been closed as a loophole, and it's just so interesting. Even Caymanians have done this, right? Caymanians have moved abroad. I've seen it countless times. Oh, I'm moving to the UK and I'm never coming back. And then when they come back, they have nothing. Their pension fund was utilized, and they took all that. Most instances spent it foolishly trying to set up life in the UK, and then oops, it didn't turn out to be quite what I wanted. Let me run back to the Cayman Islands, and now it's the government's responsibility. Or you see them on social media begging for airplane tickets for them and the kids to come back. It's just like, what are y'all doing? Miss Brenda says this seems very attractive to Caymanians, mainly because they're so underpaid everywhere they work. Desperate man takes desperate measures. I think she's referring to the withdrawals. All All right. Alejandro says, sad, not true. Why is it that there's a stigma on this island towards Indigenous Caymanians, even after graduating from public schools, that they're incapable but expect the most of us? Not quite sure that's true, but okay. I mean, look at Alice. She's an Indigenous Caymanian and one of many success stories. I think y'all need to stop focusing on the people who, claim that they can't get a job. And you need to look at the ones who are out there, lots of Caymanians, CEOs of organizations, and doing a lot of amazing things. I'm just saying. Not every single Caymanian is out there being held down. There are Caymanians who are performing extremely well. So Ms. Della, agreeing with your hand's comments earlier. Ms. Brenda says, on point. Denver says, at the end of last year, I lost $49,000 at the end of the year with Silver Thatch. Like, how is this possible? More than a 20% loss. And Denver, I'm curious, are you just looking at the 12-month period? Again, how long has your pension been there for, and what's the losses or gains over the entire life cycle of the pension? John says, you may have discussed this already, but how in the world is someone going to survive on $15,000 a year maximum withdrawal on the pensions, which is ridiculous? Tell us, explain to us how withdrawals work once you have retired.
Yeah.
And again, has that been amended at all by the government? Has it been increased, decreased, anything?
Yeah, it has
Once.
been amended recently. But, just going back to pensions in the Cayman Islands, it's still new. It's, just about 20 years old. So most members won't really have that much available in their funds. And then another key point is, what you put in is what you have available. So if you're only paying 5% of your salary, and you've only paid for the last 20 years, you're not going to have $1 million available, depending on your salary. And then also remember, there's also a contribution cap. So you're capped, your employer is not required to pay more than $8,700 for the year, depending on your salary. So this pensions is really only to provide or meet basic needs. It's not going to provide, a retirement that's going to allow you to travel for 6 months out of the year. It's not going to allow you to, purchase a yacht. And this is something that, the government is aware of. In 2020, I think 2007, they hired a consultant who basically reviewed the national pensions law and gave recommendations. Some of those recommendations have been put into place. So, for instance, they have increased the retirement age. They've increased the contribution cap. So previously it was 6,000, now it's 8,700. But things that they haven't done, they haven't increased the contribution rate.
Right.
And even though they do allow members to access AVCs under additional grounds now, it's still not as attractive as if it was open. So prior to 2016, you were only able to access AVCs at retirement. Now the law has allowed for some additional grounds such as housing, unemployment, education, but it's because it's locked in, it's still not an attractive option for most members. So, it's a matter of taking the information that they were given and actually putting that into law.
Yeah, and the retirement savings arrangement, you're allowed to take out $12,900 currently. That's being reviewed. We've been waiting for a response as to, how are they going to index that, or what are they going to increase it to? Originally, when they came out, it was 12,000 indexed 2% a year. And, then when they came out with the 12,900, that was to compensate for, prior years not having changed the rate. So we're looking, for something over 12,900, but who knows what it's going to be.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Sandy, just to add to that, in terms of the withdrawal amount too, people are living longer. So I think the average age for a woman might be between 85 and 87. And then for men, it's about 78. So, if you're living for 15, 20 years after retirement, even if you have a pension savings of, let's say 200,000, that's still not enough funds. So if you were able to withdraw, I don't know, let's say $20,000 a year, that's going to last you 10 years, possibly. So, it's just again, just educating yourself, planning for retirement. How do you want your retirement planning to look? How much funds do you plan to have at retirement age? And how are you going to achieve that goal? Now, granted, current environment is very difficult to think about retirement, but it is something that is going to happen for majority of us. So it's just something to think about sooner than later.
Interesting. All right. John Lawrence says, good morning. Can someone with naturalization apply for pension for a house? And can a husband and wife share one pension? What do you mean share one pension?
Pension. Sandy, in terms of the statuses and stuff, I'm not quite sure. Is naturalization a status holder?
Well, I think once you're a Caymanian, once you have status, you're considered a Caymanian, but you can have status and not be naturalized. So naturalization comes after getting status normally. I don't think it necessarily has to, but so John, I don't think naturalization has anything to do with it. It's whether or not you have Caymanian status, because that's what then legally defines you as being a Caymanian.
Yeah.
And so you can get Caymanian status and not be naturalized. The second part of the question about a husband and wife sharing one pension, I don't think maybe that's not the right question about sharing a pension, but can they both contribute to the house? I'm not really sure, John, if we could get some clarity on that. But you can't share a pension. A pension is in an individual person's name.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Summerstop says, what happens to a person's pension if they don't get a chance to spend it?
Yeah, it'll go to their beneficiaries. So that's another key point. If you haven't updated your account since inception, I would advise that you reach out to your pension provider. If there's been a change in your address, if there's been a change in your marital status, if there's been a change in who you'd like to, gain access to your pensions in the event that something happens to you, it's a good time to update your account.
What was the situation with spouses? First of all, Denver said he'd rather waste his money enjoying his life than somebody else wasting it. But when it came to spouses, what was there was something, is it because people were separating but not getting a divorce? And then if they died, they're not legally exes, but their spouses still were entitled to it, right?
Yeah, that's still a law. So if you're married, regardless if your spouse is estranged, your spouse is entitled to 100% of those pension benefits.
So those of you who are engaged in these fraudulent marriages, make sure you think about that for a second, because he's gonna get all your money. So that's I've seen a few people get caught by that situation already, and then they come crying to you, but they weren't even together, Miss Sandy. He left her 10 years ago. I'm like, well, he didn't bother to divorce her, so don't tell me about it. Denver says, I've been in the pension since the beginning. I'll be leaving nothing for my daughter or mother if I pass. Okay. Carol is asking for the show number, Carol, to call into the show, 936-2626. I'm not sure if that was the number, but Soursop says, so my pension savings can't be passed on to my children. It can, and it does.
I'm assuming she might be talking if she's married.
So the spouse always the spouse is always first in line, above children even.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's good to have a will in place.
Can the will change that though? Like, can your will say it can't?
No, but I'm hoping that your spouse will follow your wishes.
Good luck with that one. Not if you're separated, they're not going to be doing that. But this is why you got to tidy up your life sometimes, like get things in place like a will. If you're really not with that person, go get yourself a proper divorce and end that relationship, those sorts of things. So let's see if you have any other questions here. 936-2626, you can call in. So Lady Gangster says she's an auditor. I can prove it to you. Well, being an auditor doesn't mean that you understand pensions, because you've been saying a few things this morning that indicate a lack of full understanding of pensions. I'm just saying you can be an auditor, but still not understand pensions. Carol says, if I'm 70 plus years old, can I get the entire amount of my pension? So is there any age where you can say, instead of doing like the monthly withdrawal amounts, you can just say, give me the full thing?
Yeah, there's a schedule, but we'd have to review the schedule to see what she would be entitled to.
Yeah, so you do the retirement savings arrangement, take out the $12,900, there's a provision in there that if you reach 89, you can take out the balance of the pension.
89?
Yeah, well, where did
My
that come
gosh.
from?
Well, if I reach 89, that's going to be a party, honey child.
Yep, that's what it says.
Wow. My God. I guess anything's possible in this day and age. Let's see if you have any other questions. A lot of comments. Questions, folks. We're looking for questions while the experts are here. You're entitled to your opinions, not facts, but you're entitled to your opinions. All right, let's see. Any questions? 936. Bink says you better get a prenup. I don't know if that's gonna help you. Just get a divorce. Siobhan says, I have a question. How does a wife get your pension after the man has died and they're not on the pension, but their child outside of that marriage is on it, but yet the wife still gets it? The wife always gets it first. So in terms of line of succession, the wife is first in line above anybody else, Siobhan. That's the whole point, even above children. So, and if the outside child, I guess, belongs to the wife, of course, it's going to mean that, they benefit from it probably more than you. Sandra's, Lady Gangster says, Sandra, you know it all. No, I don't. That's why we have the experts here. That's why we have pension experts who deal with pensions every single day. And I myself have been sitting here learning from them this morning. Isn't that amazing? Because I know very little, but I'm willing to bow to the experts who know a lot and who have the experience. So Ms. Brenda says, sadly, it's the law. Spouse is the beneficiary of pension, not children, whether legitimate or illegitimate. That is the law. That's why the more you know, the more you grow. Sophia says that's the problem. The pension should not dictate to us how we get our funds. I'm not sure. Oh, you mean the amount? But how else would pension work? I'm not quite sure I understand that. Alberta says, hi, Sandy, playing devil's advocate, and to add context, would you or the panel choose to save your real estate investment from foreclosure or maintain the pension? Would you choose to save your real estate investment from foreclosure or maintain the pension? So,
I think he's asking if, like, in terms of paying down on the mortgage, if it's about to be foreclosed versus keeping a healthy pension plan. It's just, that's a tough one. But, again, it's best to evaluate your current financial position, speak to a financial advisor if one is available, just so you can make an educated decision.
Right.
We're not here to make those decisions for you. It's just, just weighing your options.
That would be a tough one for sure. And I think a lot of things, Alberta, could go into that, including how much is owed on the investment, situation. So say it's a family home, how many people would be impacted by the foreclosure? Is it a situation where you need to downsize? I think sometimes we things change in life and we could take a position of, let me downsize, let me move into something smaller. And unfortunately, we don't always want to do that, although our finances don't support the continued decision to keep larger properties and stuff like that as well. Caymanians love big. We love to build big and have big things. And that's not always fiscally the most responsible thing to do. And then I think Alberta too, what I would think of is like, what is in your pension? Like how much is actually in your pension? And does it make sense from that perspective? Okay, Jim says, what happens to the pension after you've passed away? Pension transferred over to the spouse or civil union partner, and then they die. What happens to the remainder of the pension money?
Yeah, so this is why it is good to have, other people listed as your beneficiary. It just makes the process so much easier. And also ensuring that your account is up to date. So as I mentioned, some people don't update their account from inception. So, if your spouse has passed away, notify the pension plan, fill out a new beneficiary form. If you don't have someone listed, you need to go through a lengthy process, which includes going to the courts to get a letter of probate, which can be a huge expense, especially if someone doesn't have the funds available. So just try to make it as easy as possible for your loved one. So if you do have a spouse, if you have kids or whoever you want to list as your, your second beneficiary, add them to your account.
Mhm.
So this person says, good morning. Very important topic. Education is very important. And I wish I had been given the opportunity. Through a miscalculation by the pension provider, my pension suddenly ran out 3 years before the time. So miscalculation meaning, I'd like to know, they were giving them too much and it ran out, like how, I'm not quite sure.
Mhm.
Just checking what's up to see. This person says all parents should be required to have life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, normally if you're a mortgage, it is a requirement, at least to pay off the mortgage. But you might want to have life insurance outside of that, right? Another question, will government employees be included in Nope. So can we talk a little bit about what the proposed changes are? We know that they're not in effect as yet. One more question. This person says, morning, can you please ask Alice, what about in the event that one person took early retirement at 54, but the other partner is already in full retirement age? If we sell the house, do we have to pay back the $33K withdrawal?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Either the amount that you withdrew or the
Or 10%.
10% of the market
Mhm.
value.
Whichever is higher.
Yeah.
Okay. Some very, very good questions.
Yeah.
More that have come in. So what's the proposal now, and how does it differ from what we currently have?
Yeah. So we don't actually have the finer details yet. It's just, what was passed in the LA. So the difference will be that people will be, or Caymanians will be able to withdraw to make a partial payment on their mortgage as well as land loan. And the amounts that they're able to withdraw will also change. So currently it's 35,000. That's going to change to 50,000, and this is KYD.
Okay, so it's going from 33 to 50,000.
Sorry, 35.
35
to 50,000.
And then land purchases can now be included in this as well.
As in, you can pay down on your land loan.
You can pay down on your land loan. Okay.
As
Caller
well as
in the
mortgage.
line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. I just need to make some clarifications.
Mhm.
First of all, in relation to the comment that was made earlier about closing the loophole for people who are, regardless of their nationality, no longer residing and providing proof. I was under the impression that once any individual fund was less than 5,000 CI, they were still able to retrieve that.
Yep, I did mention that.
No
So once it's
longer
over
available?
5,000. So once it's over 5,000, they're
I'm
not
sorry.
allowed.
Yeah, just repeat that again for us, Alice.
Yes. So for anyone who has more than 5,000, the termination of residence option is not available to them. So if their account balance is less than 5,000, they can still make an application to withdraw their funds once they've left the island.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that because it sounded like that was no longer available. And then in relation to this whole, I guess the terminology is what is misleading in relation to this payback 1% thing. At the time when the law was first passed in relation to being able to do your mortgage or whatever, what was explained to me was you still can, even though you take this, you dip into it and you take this lump sum amount out, it doesn't mean that you don't continue paying pension once you're still pension contributory age. However, in addition to the 5% that you're mandated to pay, you would pay an additional 1% because you've taken so much out, and that was supposed to be some sort of minimal offset to what you've withdrawn. So I think it's misleading when people hear payback because you're not really paying back anything. You're just increasing your contributions from 5% to 6% to try and get back to build back up your pension.
No, but you are paying it back. You are paying it back with that 1% or 10%.
That's what I'm saying. The payback terminology, when it's your own, I think is what's misleading. You're increasing your contribution. You know what I mean? In other words, I think that is what is misleading the public in that, or well, who am I paying it back to? Well, you're paying it back to yourself.
Well, you're paying it back to the pension.
Well, you're putting it back into your account.
Ultimately, will be yours or your beneficiary.
Yeah,
if you die before. Other thing is, I've had some people say to me that when they stated their beneficiaries, when they're married, that they would put their spouse and their children, and situations occurred where in the event of the pension contributor's death, the spouse got 50% and the children got the remaining. But I was under the impression that 100% automatically goes once you're married. Can you clarify exactly how that works as per the law, please?
Yeah, that's correct. So 100% will go to the spouse. There is
no matter who you list as your beneficiaries or how many you list, right?
No. Yeah, as in, yes, you're right. You're right that your spouse will receive 100% of the benefits, regardless if there are 5 people listed, including your spouse.
Okay. And then somebody asked a question. This is my last. Sorry. Somebody asked a question about, in the event of the death, this same additional 1% on top of the 5, if that would remain due to the contributions. If you're dead and you no longer have a pension, then how can the law mandate any contributions to continue to be paid when that is coming from income? And if you're dead, obviously you don't have any more income.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we have to.
Started this before. I'm just looking at the technicalities of it. So it would be null and void at that point.
Well, I can't comment on that right now. We would have to confirm with the Department of Labor and Pensions. In terms of the lien itself, I'm not sure about the 1% repayment. Obviously, if the person has passed away, there's no obligation there. But in terms of removing the lien, I am not sure how that will be handled.
Yes, that's true. Yes, good point. Good point. Good point. We wasn't thinking about that. I would just like to say that a while back, my company came under Saxon administrators, and I had numerous issues. One day I was on the phone with Alice Ramos, and she is amazing. She completely de-escalated my situation. She took me from being livid, annoyed, frustrated, and her temperament is always professional. And I am so proud that she is a young Caymanian who is successful.
Absolutely.
And she has been a role model to many people. I've heard nothing about positive things about her. Kudos to you, Alice. I don't know if you remember me, but you are amazing and exceptional. So well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful long weekend.
Thanks. Oh, yeah. Thanks. Same to you. Yeah, Alice, you've got a very calm demeanor. I mean, I know you've got a little one. We've been to birthday parties and stuff with your little one, and I have to wonder if you're always as calm with her. Is this your overall personality?
Yeah, 99% of the time.
Yeah, it really is amazing. So we've got Alejandro saying that you're borrowing that money that you put in because it's meant for the retirement age, so you speed up the repayment with the 1% added. But I mean, you're repaying it. To be very, very clear, you have to repay it. And I think, don't forget, it's not necessarily the 1%. It's 1% or 10% of the value, whichever is greater. So you may be paying back more than the 1% and more than what you actually borrowed, folks. That's got to be crystal clear. Good morning, Mr. Sidney. Says, please find out from your guest if you are a beneficiary and the holder of a policy should pass away. The policy ends there. The beneficiary should receive a cash payout. So how does, okay, I think I understand the question.
Yeah.
So, you pass away and your beneficiary, whether it's a spouse or whoever, how do they get the funds? Do they have to wait till retirement age to get the money, or how does it work?
No, they can make an application to the plan. Payout. So they have to contact the plan directly. And then there are a few options, which includes a lump sum payout, or they could defer the payment until retirement. So it just depends on what they would prefer.
All right. Tammy says, are we able to repay back more than 1% each month?
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. And if someone wants to make, like a lump sum payment on top of the amount that they withdrew, they can also do that.
Oh, that's good to know. Good question, Tammy. Scott says it's time to put anonymous Lady G in timeout. Well, she's about to get blocked. Don't worry about it, Scott. We don't really have time for too much foolishness around here, especially when it's a wonderful educational segment like this. The negativity and the misinformation, all those comments just are not helpful. So Alejandro says, then it's best to thug it out for the people that don't understand the struggle. That's the truth. I think it's a decision, Alejandro, that you have to contemplate very, very carefully whether or not this is the right decision for you. Look at all of your, and sit down with someone who's a financial advisor and look at all of the aspects of your pension contributions. It's not always the best thing to just grab at it. I mean, I said this during the COVID pandemic. There are people who were working in households, working for government, et cetera, who did not need to touch their pension money. They had, like, the spouse worked for government. They didn't lose their job. They didn't have a cut in salary, and they still went after it. And then what they did with it, to me, was even more shocking, in that they were very, very frivolous with it. Like, I had loan managers say to me, Sandy, people were paying off car loans, which, when you think about it, that would be good because that's a high interest rate loan. But then they turned around and got a new car loan. And the bank was like, huh? How does that make any sense? We're still in a pandemic. We don't know where we're going. Like, it was just, even the banks were shaking their head. They're happy to give you a loan because they're going to make their interest off of you and they're going to make money. But even to them, we're shaking their heads about the fiscal irresponsibility of a lot of our people. So Charles says, for the Chamber of Commerce and Silver Thatch, are they under the same umbrella? If so, does it make any sense to switch from one to the other if a person holds both with no contribution going into one? So some years ago, Chamber, they used to manage their own fund, and I think they handed it over to Silver Thatch. Is that what happened?
No.
Oh, okay.
Two plans are completely different.
Oh, okay.
So the Chamber pension plan and the Silver Thatch pension plan remain as two separate plans. The
Okay.
only similarity is they have the same administrative agents. So that is Saxon, who I represent. So we handle the the customer service. If you need to complete a retirement application, if you need to know your account balance, if you need to make a payment towards your contributions, those are the things that Saxon deals with. But the plans are separate. And when it comes to transfers, again, it's an individual's choice. So they need to make an informed decision if they want to either consolidate their pensions or if they want to maintain 2 or 3 or 4 separate accounts. So they are not required, especially if there's a change in employment or if there's a change in pension plan because a group has decided to leave one plan for another. There's no requirement that they have to consolidate their pensions. It's an individual's decision.
Let me ask you this question. So this person says that they work for a company. When they filled out their pension paperwork, they are married and they put 100% to their father. And they told them that they had to change it where at least the spouse is 50%, but you just said the spouse is going to get 100%. So why would they tell them to change it to the spouse getting 50%?
It might have been maybe just record keeping, having the spouse information on file, and maybe just having the father, as a second beneficiary in the event that the spouse passed away. But I can't really say in that scenario.
Yeah, but regardless, the spouse would be getting 100%.
Yes, yes.
That's the law. Wow.
Yep.
Good to know, because I mean, this person's thinking that their spouse is going to get 50% and then the parents will get 50%. Not at all. Okay, folks, this has been a fantastic segment. I think we've gotten to most, if not all, of the questions. Someone said that 401ks are actually being overhauled. There's no perfect investment scheme or any sort of perfect scenario out there. Someone said, what are the consequences or penalties for not repaying the loan?
I believe there are fines listed in the law. I would have to double check on that.
Yeah. And then there's a lien on the property. So in theory, they could take the property potentially, maybe.
Yeah.
If there's a lien
I'm
on
not sure
it.
if it's that expensive, but yeah.
And someone has a lien on your property. One question from Josephina. Did we answer this question? She says that she has a friend whose wife died in 2016 and Fidelity Pensions told him that he couldn't access the pension until he retires and he's the sole beneficiary. But you just said you can apply to get it.
Well, I mean, in any pension plan's defense, there was a a case that came forward, a few years ago that has since allowed people to receive cash payouts immediately once they've applied. So depending on the year that that person made an application, maybe it wasn't known at that point, but it has since changed. So, perhaps the person can make another application because that option is available. But
yes. And Joanna says that, Josephina, that shouldn't be the case. They can access the funds under Section 39 of the National Pensions Law. He can redeem units in a lump sum. So perhaps, have him look into that again. Charles says, thank you, in reference to that question, for the plan that is currently getting no contribution to it. What are the chances of losing funds with the risk of investing?
I'd say, Randy said there's no crystal ball, but in terms of past investments and our historical returns, I would say it's pretty safe. But again, that be for the person to review.
Moya says, so if a person has that their children is to get a majority of their pension and turn around and also gets a will that states that they will receive the pension. I'm not really quite sure I understand the question, but a will can't supersede
the pensions law.
Correct.
The pensions law, to be
No.
very, very clear.
Yeah, it's usually one of our hottest topics when we do presentations. Again, no, but if you have a spouse, the funds, 100% of the funds will go to your spouse. So if you do have a will, hopefully your spouse will follow your wishes. We do recommend that people have a will in place because there are other, finances that the person might leave behind, other assets. So it's just good to have that in place. Just going back to life skills, everything is included: pensions, wills, mortgages,
estate planning.
So this final question on this, suppose that you are divorced, but the spouse is still listed as beneficiary. Can the funds go to the children upon death?
Yes. Again, that would have to go to the courts because they would have to get a letter of probate. So again, it's so important to update your records. So if you haven't done it, reach out to your pension plan to update your records.
Is the perfect opportunity. All right, folks, thank you so much to our guest today, Alice Ramos from Saxon, Deputy Chair of the Cayman Islands Pension Association.
Administrators Association.
Pension Administrators Association.
Yes.
That's a mouthful.
Yep.
And Mr. Randall Fisher, who is the chairman of that same association. Again, lots of questions were coming up over the last couple of weeks because of the pending legislative changes. And we just wanted to make sure that you guys understood what the pension law currently says. We don't have all the finer details on all the proposed changes, but it's just increasing it a little bit, but some serious implications surrounding your decision to access your pension fund for the purposes of, contributing towards your mortgage. So Moya says this is making her think now. I think we're all walking away, including myself, with food for thought after today's discussion. Siobhan is saying, I won't be getting married. So that's what she's thinking. We'll see, Siobhan. We'll expect an invite to the wedding if you change your mind. But thank you so much again to Alice and Mr. Randall for coming in the program, openly answering your questions and educating the public. This is what I think this platform is most beneficial and most useful, giving you guys correct and accurate information right from the experts, and no better people to get it from than these two for sure. So thank you so much, Alice. Really, really appreciate it. Mr. Randall, you guys have a safe and wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.